the crisis measures imposed on the Cypriot people in relation to the banking situation on the island show that the words emanating from EU leaders at their summits are utterly redundant. Since we were promised seismic changes in the way banking and sovereign debts were dealt with in the EU in June 2012, instead, the citizens of Europe have been treated to institutional dishonesty and mendacity by a dissimulating EU leadership. In the old days, bank robbers wore masks and waved guns around. There was no mistaking their intention. The gang leaders demanded the cash and they fled the scene fearful of capture. In today's European Union, bank robberies are planned in Brussels and Frankfurt. The godfathers united in a gang called the Troika send their hit men and women in pinstripe suits. They stay in luxury hotels at the expense of their intended victims and rob with the threat of a nuclear wipeout of bank depositors, bank workers, and the very economies of the target countries. In the old days, bank workers and aggrieved depositors, victims of bank robberies, could turn to the law for redress. In today's European Union, the bank robbers are the law. This is the surreal new world of the EU, where the establishment of the EU, Big Brother, and it would seem the ghost of John Dillinger, have morphed into an economic Frankenstein that terrorizes citizens, robs their assets, and lays waste their economies. Now, once the European Union establishment used to boast loudly that it was a haven of democracy and solidarity, a beacon of light in our world, an example to be imitated by the savages who were unlucky enough to find themselves outside its borders. After 2 weeks in which the Cypriot people, the smallest member state in the EU, have been threatened, terrorized and bullied by the EU, the IMF and the ECB, the moral reputation of this Troika lies somewhere south of that of robber barons and economic gang rapists. That an Irish government, as president of the EU, would warmly welcome the first edict relating to Cypriot banks that literally would rob working people and pensioners in Cyprus and literally steal the widow's mite, is a grotesque betrayal of the generosity of the Irish people. We have a government in Ireland which is in a position of perpetual prostration in face of the demands of the institution of European capitalism, the IMF, the ECB, and the EU bureaucracy itself. As an Irish legislator and socialist, I apologise to the people of Cyprus for the treacherous role of the Irish government in its collusion with the modern robber barons of the Troika as it seeks out a bailout of its diseased financial system. Aggressive states invariably invent a pretext for an attack on another country. So also with the Troika. The slander in this case is that Cyprus is virtually a client state of the Russian mafia. What nauseating hypocrisy. The EU was a key cheerleader for the privatization of massive assets that belonged to the Russian people when Stalinism collapsed. This meant the pillage of the privatized assets by those who became oligarchs and billionaires. For 20 years before the international financial crash of 2007, the EU was a key cheerleader and implementing agency for wholesale deregulation and liberalisation in the financial markets, enabling billions to be transferred freely all over the world in search of speculative profits. The people of Cyprus are the victims of these policies. If the financial market system is sick, dysfunctional, destructive of democracy and exploitative of ordinary people and society, and it is all of these, it has become so on the watch and under the legislative provision of the institutions now collectively known as the Troika. The Troika solution to its disease system it has created is to burn the civilian population, leaving an economic scorched earth in its wake. In conclusion, Cyprus is the last straw. It's time the victims turned. It's time that workers and the poor united across borders, from Greece to Ireland, to break this dysfunctional system, take the financial institutions internationally into public ownership and democratic control, and plan for people, not for private profit. That's the democratic socialist alternative.
Deputy Joan Collins, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Lascan Caller. Tanaoshta, 5 years after Lehman's collapsed, 5 years into the crisis, there's been no reform of the banking system, and there's not been real discussion or debate